North Korean military advisors arrived in occupied Mariupol and were spotted in the eastern part of the Kharkiv region, CNN reports the publication with reference to Ukrainian sources. According to the source, technical advisors have arrived in Mariupol, but the purpose of their visit is unclear. Although the Koreans are dressed in Russian military uniforms, they remain separated from the Russian units with which they interact. While other foreign fighters in the Russian ranks are mixed in with the units, the North Koreans are kept separate. They have their own quarters, food, music, and films, the source added. North Korean troops have also been spotted in the Kharkiv region. According to Yevgeny Romanov, a representative of the Military Unit Association in Kharkiv, the presence of the Koreans is indicated by radio intercepts. "I see that they are breaking up into units, strengthening their combat units, accumulating a small number of forces on the front line. They are waiting for the weather to get worse, because for the enemy this is the best time to begin assault operations," added Nazary Kishak, commander of the combined unit of the 153rd Separate Mechanized Brigade. The source also said that recent Ukrainian missile strikes on Russian territory targeted a senior North Korean general, but it remains unclear whether he was killed in the strike. As media reported, on the afternoon of November 20th, the Ukrainian armed forces launched a powerful strike with Storm Shadow missiles on a facility in the Kursk region. In total, about a dozen missiles were used. According to analysts, the use of a large number of scarce missiles at once indicates a high priority for the target. In particular, there were suggestions that they struck a bunker where Russian and North Korean generals could be located. The next day, the Wall Street Journal wrote that as a result of this missile strike in the Kursk region, a high-ranking North Korean general was wounded.
Many experts fear that US President-elect Donald Trump may throw Ukraine under the bus in his bid to end the war at any cost. However, at least one expert believes that Trump will instead give Ukraine nuclear weapons to protect it from any future Russian encroachment, writes the Daily Express. In the next 4 years, Russia will rearm, but also Ukraine will recover, rearm, and prepare. That preparation could include the United States providing nuclear weapons to Ukraine, says Nicholas Drummond, a British security and defence expert and a non-staff consultant to the British Parliament's Defence Committee. In his opinion, the agreement on the transfer of nuclear weapons to Ukraine could be concluded secretly and later, if necessary, Kyiv could issue a warning. "We have nuclear weapons, and if you attack us, we will bomb Moscow." Can you imagine what this would mean for Putin? It could be Trump's Trump card. On the one hand, it could be reckless to give Ukraine nuclear weapons. On the other hand, it would restore the balance of peace and power in the region. The US could say that they will give Ukraine nuclear weapons, but say that you cannot join NATO. Drummond believes. It is still not clear what Trump plans to do in Ukraine. The Wall Street Journal reported this month that he will look to establish a demilitarized zone between Ukraine and Russia. Citing a source close to Trump, the news outlet added that the US could seek to freeze Ukraine's NATO bid for 20 years. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Sunday that the war will end quicker with Trump in the White House. He said the war will end faster with the policy of this team that will now lead the White House. He continued, "We must do everything to ensure that the war ends next year through diplomatic means." Vladimir Putin is open to discussing a Ukraine ceasefire deal with Donald Trump, but rules out making any major territorial concessions and insists Kyiv abandon ambitions to join NATO, 5 sources with knowledge of Kremlin thinking told Reuters. US President-elect Trump, who has vowed to swiftly end the conflict, is returning to the White House at a time of Russian ascendancy. Moscow controls a chunk of Ukraine about the size of the American state of Virginia and is advancing at the fastest pace since the early days of the 2022 invasion. In the first detailed reporting of what President Putin would accept in any deal brokered by Trump, the 5 current and former Russian officials said the Kremlin could broadly agree to freeze the conflict along the front lines. There may be room for negotiation over the precise carve-up of the 4 eastern regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson, according to 3 of the people who all requested anonymity to discuss sensitive matters. While Moscow claims the 4 regions as wholly part of Russia, defended by the country's nuclear umbrella, its forces on the ground control 70 to 80% of the territory, with about 26,000 square kilometers still held by Ukrainian troops. Open source data on the front line shows Russia may also be open to withdrawing from the relatively small patches of territory it holds in the Kharkiv, Mykolaiv regions in the north and south of Ukraine, 2 of the officials said. Ukrainian Armed Forces officer Ihor Lapin believes that US President Joe Biden would not approve long-range capabilities without coordinating with Donald Trump. The fact is, from the US perspective, these permits hinged on 2 issues. The first point is guidance systems using American satellites. With all due respect, but Prytula satellite, a satellite purchased by Serhiy Prytula Charity Foundation for the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces, will not solve such problems. The second point is strengthening Ukraine's negotiating position. Right now, everyone is talking about the United States. Trump, the newly elected president, saying there will soon be a stop, a freeze, or whatever we call it. But to bring Putin to the negotiating table, we always asked, what did Putin say about that? Is he ready? And Putin responded with the same nonsense about the Istanbul agreements, denazification, and the goals of the Minsk agreements. We've all heard this repeatedly. Moreover, why would Putin sit down at the negotiating table if his front is moving westward, not eastward? There are 2 things that could put him in a bind. Either if the front were moving east and we were advancing, that's one scenario, or the second is if Russia's economy were collapsing, or if internal processes, like the struggle of enslaved peoples inside, led to the breakup of Russia. Then, of course, we would be worried about something, he said on Espresso TV. According to Ihor Lapin, the Western partners have strengthened Ukraine's negotiating position with this decision. The issue is to provide Ukraine with capabilities, and how much we will use them is a different question. So to speak, instead of us, our Western partners, the Americans, have strengthened our negotiating position. This is the only algorithm that can substantiate the fact that somehow pressure will be put on Putin. It's by having certain weapons that we can assert that we too have a strong position. I'm not going to praise or criticize the president's speech in Parliament right now, but he also talked about 3,000 missiles and 30,000 long-range drones. But this will all happen someday, if the money is not stolen, the officer said. The military officer noted that despite the election cries, it is important for Americans to set up their successor. But as for Trump's statement that he will come to office and almost immediately call for a ceasefire, he needs to have some argument for that. That's why I don't think Biden made this statement and granted this authorization without first agreeing on a position with Trump, with whom they met the day before. I emphasize, for a smooth transfer of power. You see, political statements and election rhetoric are one thing, but for America, above all, it is its own national interest. This is a very important matter for them, not to set up their successor, because again, America is above all, not Ukraine. So I believe this was agreed upon, he said.